Welcome to the Texas Oil and Gas Podcast, the show dedicated to bring you the news from the oil patch deep in the heart of Texas, with your hosts, Ryan Ray and Josh Shelton.
And we're back with the Texas Oil and Gas Podcast. This is episode 128. I'm your host, Josh Shelton, friend and co-host Ryan Ray. Ryan, had a great week out in Midland, man. How'd yours go down in Houston?
Nate, I got to bring you in here first thing.
Yeah.
Josh says he had a great week.
He used an incorrect form of address, though.
But yeah, he did use it. We'll get to that in a second. But, you know, we see him on the road for like a day and a half. He looks like he's been serving 3 tours of Nam when he come back. Look at the guy. I mean, he comes in
Got
this
a beard,
morning, a long beard.
Scraggly.
He's been drinking coffee all day.
Yep. He's wearing his jacket with a stain on the elbow. Hair's all messed up.
He was gone for like 24
kind of
hours.
a vacant look in his eyes, too. I think we should check him into a psych ward.
Oh, man. I mean, are you okay over there?
I lost track of the hair gel, man. Y'all leave the hair alone. The hair is just fine today. We don't do video anymore, so I was like, screw it. You know.
When I was on tour in Midland, I lost my hair gel. Worst memory of my life.
He's even got on the green.
Flashbacks.
The green and the navy, the green and the khaki, and so you okay over there?
Yeah, man. But look, it's step 1 of Halloween. So today's Halloween, so I'm kind of hanging loose.
So he dressed up as a slob.
That's my job, okay? Don't take my role from me, okay? Yeah, it is Thursday, Halloween. We normally record on Mondays, and we talked about this last week. I'm supposed to be out of the country next week. It's actually in kind of limbo right now, but regardless, we're recording on Thursday, just the 31st, just to be safe. So if there's any stories that break between now and the show comes out on Tuesday, so we didn't cover that as well. We have a lot to get to. We will talk about kind of how my week was in a second, Josh, but I want to get to these reviews because they came in last week, if you remember. Someone said I complained. So this show, my goal is not to complain. That's my goal. So let's start off with the reviews. Amazing podcast, 5 stars. The Fourth Face, obviously in reference to Mount Rushmore. Ryan mumbles a bit. Josh is a little left of center. Thank God for Nate.
Yes.
Now, when the listener talks about me not complaining, I want you to know how hard it is at this moment not to complain. But I'm not going to complain.
Why? Because they gave me kudos?
No. I mean, the fact that they called Josh a socialist was much appreciated. I do appreciate that. Yeah, I mumble. Okay. God, you got to mumble shame me right here on the podcast. That's tough. But we're not going to complain. I am happy. And we'll go on to great news and humor, 5 stars. Love this show, Ryan, Josh, and Nate. How's Nate getting involved in all this all of a sudden? People, we want Nate in the lake. We don't necessarily need you to bring it up unless you're appreciating him, in air quotes, like we heard a few weeks ago. All do a great job talking through the news and the industry and what it might not mean for everyone, and doing so in a fun way that's entertaining to listen to. Thank you for that. And finally, now this is a great reference of Nate. Nate in the Lake. That's the headline there, 5 stars. Great podcast, very informative and fun to listen to. So we are creeping towards the magical 200. We have to get them numbers up. A few of you have sent in a request for stickers, ryan@gor2.com. If you take a screenshot of your review, email it to me. We will get them. We got the stickers in today. They're around here somewhere. They're a little small.
Around that desk there. They're about the size of a quarter.
Yeah, I thought I got a bigger size. So I'm going to order a bigger size, and then we'll ship those out when they get in. So I wasn't really reading the instruction manual when I ordered those, I suppose. So we'll order a bigger size, and that way you won't have something you will lose on the first day at least. So anyways, Josh, back to my week.
Josh addressed you incorrectly.
He did. Thank you, Nate, for bringing that.
Comrade.
Yeah. Whoa. So this week, as we had on Robin Goodman on a few weeks ago, the favorite brother of the podcast compared to Reed Goodman, at least for me. We had him on a few weeks ago talk about the Bush China Conference. We talked about that. I was there. Got down. See, this is the difference between me and Josh, Nate. I was there Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night. Didn't get home till 7 o'clock last night. So that's just get on the record.
Well, we know already that you're the Cal Ripken of
I am the Cal Ripken of podcasting, and I had to wear a suit for 2 days. Do you know what kind of stress that puts on me to have a suit and tie for 2 days?
You look good in a suit.
I mean,
and tie,
I had
man.
to put a suit and tie on. That was tough. I about strangled myself with the tie. Not in not non-intention, on purpose, of course. But anyways, so day one was really good. Day two, we had the hackathon, which they asked me to participate in. And
the Chinese do really good hackathons.
Yeah. So we participated in a policy hackathon, and it should not be a surprise to our listeners and my loyal fan base that my team presented the greatest policy hack known to mankind. It wouldn't surprise me if the Bushes themselves reached out to me and asked about implementation. We're in negotiations, I'm presuming. I haven't heard from them yet, but I hadn't talked to my lawyer either, so I don't know. But my team did win the hackathon, so that was great. And the conference.
What was the reward? Was this a golden rice bowl? Did you guys get a piece of paper?
Well, I mean, I did let Neil Bush take a picture with me. I thought that was nice of me. Right, the big star like me coming in.
Big-hearted, yeah.
Yeah, it was very nice, very nice, very nice. Yeah, we did get a certificate they're going to mail. It just had Team 1, which was a little bit insulting. I told them that we were the A team. We're not Team 1. We were the A team. And I made that very, very, very clear to them.
They already admitted that you're number one, Ryan. What more do you want?
Yeah, I know. But anyway, so we dominated that conference, me and my three compatriots, and heard that we had good reviews from both sides of the aisle, which is surprising because I'm usually not trying to appeal to both sides. So it does show that I have a compassionate, diplomatic heart that can solve major international issues. And it doesn't surprise me necessarily, but probably to some of you folks it might, especially the ones that say I complain and mumble. So anyways, so there's that. And I will be in China here in a few weeks. President Trump, we know you listen. If you want me to go ahead and get this trade war wrapped up, now that I'm a certified foreign policy expert, I will be happy to knock that out for you. The trip's already paid for, so I can kind of just knock that between meetings. And I mean, it took us 5 hours to solve major international policy. I can get this trade war wrapped up in probably a day. I got a Saturday off, I think, so I can go ahead and get that knocked out.
Okay.
I'm being probably too generous with that. I don't need a full day. We got to probably play golf or shoot skeet or something. So.
Well, you need to have time for the after party.
That's exactly right. Exactly
Yeah.
right. What do you get when you? Is that the Medal of Freedom? What do we get as civilians? I can't remember. It's not the. There's the military one and there's the civilian one. I'll take the civilian one.
I mean, yeah, you've got the Presidential Medal of Freedom, but for solving a foreign policy thing and
saving our country. That's what I would be doing when I'm in China. And two countries, really. So China should give me an award. They should rename the Great Wall after me. I tell you what, no awards, just rename the Great Wall. The Wall of Ryan, we'll call all things equal. Trump has a wall. I want a wall named after me. So we'll just leave it at that.
Well, Ryan, one of your goals is not to complain. My goal starting the each show is to
not be a communist anymore.
Get you to fail in your goal. So let's see by the end of this podcast.
I haven't complained yet, right?
Not that I've heard.
Not that I've heard. Okay, so the complaint counter is not going off yet.
Yeah.
The mumble counter, let's throw that out the window.
I need to get a dinger so I can ding you whenever you complain.
I do need to give a quick shout out. I did meet with a couple of listeners, so to Alex and Mike, got to spend some time with them because I am a man of the people, Josh, and so I got to hang out with those gentlemen in Houston yesterday. So it was good to meet up with them. I'm sure you didn't see anybody in Midland, but he still looked ravaged. No, he didn't. He just look at him. No one would talk to that guy. Look at him.
That's the sort of face that somebody who's been meeting customers and listeners. I mean, has been wears though.
Yeah, well, it's strange to go in a place like Midland. Like, you're like a rock star when you have a podcast like this. You got people calling you. You got people asking you questions.
Where's Ryan? I'm sure it gets old for you.
Yeah, I told him you were
solving the world's problems.
No, I had a different selection of words to be precise. So I got a question from a friend of mine that we had lunch about 3-4 months ago. George, we met in Fort Worth. And he just sent me a question. He has, from the investor side, from the banking side, he mentioned someone we're not going to name, but the bank basically said that they're nervous about the outlook of the oil and gas industry. He said that 15% of the bank was laid off in the first couple of weeks that he was there. And he was saying the reason for this was because of the well spacing. He was talking about how a bunch of people levered up a couple of wells on land they purchased with the sole intention of selling those assets to larger companies. Then after all the companies purchased those new assets, they started to realize that the oil was actually not there, and the large companies had way overpaid for all these assets. I think the issue is the larger companies realized the value's not there in the assets, and that they thought or that it poses a huge problem for everyone in the industry. And so one of the things that we've talked about, you got Concho that had their reports that come out where they had spaced their wells too close, and so they had diminishing returns on their wells. You also have the issue, some of the reports that came out where you got the Deloitte folks that were on where they had invested.
But they said the opposite. They said that they found child spacing to not be a problem sometimes.
Yeah, they said that. And then they also said some people use too much proppant. So they were losing money on that where they were, what do they say, over engineering?
Over and under engineering.
Yeah, so there was that. I think the big issue, though, is the way they were predicting return. So they would go in and say, hey, we got 1,000 barrels a day that's being produced on this well. We're going to do 6 more. So we're going to have 7,000 barrels a day. And then they do an evaluation on the land based on these projected numbers. And then it ends up being 5,800 instead of 7,000 barrels a day. And the valuation was therefore way overestimated. So that's part of it. I don't know if the companies that went in and did this are necessarily to blame or if this is simply working itself out. But there's a possibility there could have been some irresponsibleness to try to, I guess, pull a fast one on some of these investors and banks. But as far as I can tell, it was probably an honest mistake where they thought that these projections were accurate and then they turned out not to be.
Yeah, I was reading someone the other day talking about they were kind of touting the idea that the projections that they were given at this point in time for some company, not to do with this at all, weren't as great as they were led to believe, and they knew it all along, and this, that, and the other. And this person, I don't know what they did or didn't know. What's hard about these cases is if you go back to just a few different things on this show, and one of the things we probably try to point out regularly is if you go back to what Deloitte said, that the parent-child well spacing isn't always an issue, and that the longer lateral sometimes isn't as valuable, and that different engineering strategies impact it. You start to hear people say those things. Even David Blackman, apart from Deloitte, alluded to that. And so there's a lot of questions here. What was, what kind of geology did they have? What kind of reports did these people have? What were they saying? Was it a small differential or a large differential? What exactly was there? And it's kind of hard to know about this specific case. I think the thing that distress to the listeners is, and we're all guilty of this on some level, but we have to remember is every well's not the same. Every engineering company's not the same. Every E&P company's not the same. Every frac company, there are differences. And are there people who are bad actors and will lie to investors or mislead investors to get money? Yes, sure. Are there people who genuinely thought that they could do things a certain way and it would work out better than it actually does? Yes. So for people in the industry, when you hear bad news, you can't take that bad news and say, well, this is exactly how everything in the industry now is. And that's our tendency. That's how that makes it easy for us as people to think if that either President Trump is great or he's terrible. Either the Democrats are great or they're terrible. Either oil is good or it's bad. And that's just not the way things are. We have a company we work for. We do some things better than others. We do some things not as good as others. We have our strengths. We have our weaknesses. So the news is not reported that way, and that's what makes it so hard for us. And I feel like we beat the horse, if you will, every week because we kind of keep reminding this, but it's a very important thing. In this particular case, again, we don't know enough facts to kind of speak to what happened here, but it could be a wide range of things. And so if you go back, again, to what Deloitte said, they might point to spots to where the child well spacing was better or as advertised, right? And so you'd say, well, for these particular bankers, maybe they're overreacting. And I don't blame the bankers. If they lost a bunch of money, they might be going, oh, my gracious, they're not in the oil and gas business. If this is what people are doing, then, hey, we don't want to be involved with that. So I can understand the reactions, but as folks in the industry, it's a little bit harder to decipher what's going on a case-by-case basis. I think the thing that at least I know I like to use as a leading indicator is where are people putting their money. It doesn't mean that they're right, and it doesn't mean they're necessarily being honest, but at least you know that they're going to do it because they're putting their money there. So you look at these large publicly traded companies, if they're putting money into something, at least you know that is going to be done, and you can't actually measure that result on some level. And then if you come and find out that those people were lying to you and committing fraud, that's a different argument altogether. If you come and figure out that they were just not educated, they're ignorant in the true sense of the word, then that's different. So I think that there's a spectrum for these things, and the media, and me and you were guilty of this as well. We like to kind of lump everything in and make everything a nice tight bow, and this is what works. Remember, Josh, let's go back to maybe a year or two ago. There were articles talking about why everyone should go to the Permian. And what did we say at that time? We said that the Permian is not for everyone. There's different competitive advantages in the Permian than there are in the Eagle Ford, right? Mm-hmm. And so your company might thrive in the Permian. You might make $1 billion in the Permian. Or you might go out there and just get waxed because it's a very competitive market. The Eagle Ford, the margins are a little tighter. The competitive nature is a little bit different. But you might thrive there because it suits your company's your company's skill set. So same thing here. It's that's a play-to-play type comparison, but a company-to-company type comparison, following what's going on, I think is what gets lost in these discussions. And obviously this gentleman isn't saying that. He's asking about a specific example, but that's how I like to try to think through these things is, okay, what are the possible things that could have happened? If someone was asking me, I would try to lay what are the possible solutions or possible problems. What possibly could have happened? Could they have been committing fraud? Yes. Could they have just had bad calculations? Yes. The result is still a loss of money, right? It doesn't change anything. But if it's a fundamentally different thing. If the result is a loss of money on one side, then you can go and say, okay, well, we know that in this case that this type of drilling program will not work. Therefore, we're not going to give the valuation the same moving forward, right? So we're going to lessen our exposure. So a new company comes in and says, we have a similar asset. We go, you know what? We got burned on that deal before. Last time we valued it at $100 million. This time we're going to value it at $75 million because that's where the actual number was. Well, now you actually have a good valuation that you'd be happy with. Yep. So you don't know. But now if it was a fraudulent deal and the oil wasn't there at all, then that's so there's degrees, and that's where I think we have to, if we're trying to think through these things, how we have to look at it.
Yeah, it makes me wonder with the way. What parts of the industry were hit the hardest with these companies? And we talked about some that were overpaying for acreage and getting off on the wrong foot early on in their projects, and also the question of private equity backed and how a lot of these companies were coming in to flip and sell, and so the Permian provided an opportunity for that, but at the same time, it also it brought in that competition, like you mentioned, and so these private equity companies went in to have a quick flip, and it's just changed the dynamic of what people are looking to do with these startups now. They're if they can't live within cash flow, then the banks are probably not going to give them investments, and it's hard to really pinpoint what part of the industry was hit the hardest. If it was going to be the private equity backed smaller companies, or if it was the bigger ones that saw hits in some of their stocks. The majors seem to be doing just fine. I don't see any issue with them so far.
Well, but they have a more diversified ability to make money. Mm-hmm. And so they can make money a lot of different ways, whereas a traditional E&P company has primarily one avenue of making money. Just kind of flatten it out a little bit. But one thing that you mentioned there, you talk about they get into expensive and I would love to go back and kind of read when oil was, at $100 a barrel or natural gas was really high, how those conference calls went with Wall Street investors, because those are the times when they're paying a substantial amount for this acreage. And I would be curious to see what Wall Street was saying, what the headlines were reading at those times, because if memory serves me right, Wall Street was encouraging them to expand their drilling program, expand your drilling program. We're not worried about returns necessarily right now. And so a lot of, now, I'm not going to get all the way into this discussion because we don't have time. We need to move on. But Wall Street, it's funny because they don't like to take any blame for them incentivizing the oil and gas industry to potentially overpay for acreage or to, not be as efficient as possible. Some companies were a lot more strategic. They're a lot more slower. They saw potentially what other companies didn't see. And the final thing I would say is this is one way the market works itself out, right? Some companies are very good. Some companies are very aggressive. And you could sit back and say in different industries, well, some company, they didn't make a lot of money and they took all the risk and now they're the number one company in the industry, and look at them, they persevered. Plenty of companies take that model and fail. And so in our industry, you're going to see the same thing. Companies that take risk, some of them will succeed, some of them will persevere, some of them won't. And so it's just the same thing. Sometimes it feels like we don't take normal principles and apply them to our industry when we try to review how companies are doing or how the industry is doing as a whole.
Well, we have an article we're going to jump into about the biggest oil and gas discoveries of 2019. So the first one, number one, was in Russia, 1.5 billion barrels of oil equivalent was found in the Arctic waters, Russian Arctic waters. So huge find. They're going to be developing that for quite some time. It pretty exciting for the Russian companies. Number 2 was, I hope I don't pronounce this, Guyana. More than 6 billion barrels and climbing. ExxonMobil just put Guyana on the oil and gas map for the first time. And the last one but not least, Cyprus, up to 8 trillion cubic feet of disputed gas. So huge discoveries here, and they're gonna drive, I think, a lot of the international oil markets with some of this offshore discoveries. And I'm curious about that because we haven't heard much about offshore stuff. I mean, we've seen some. I mean, we have mentioned it some, but it hasn't been nearly what it was, say, 4 years ago, or even sooner than that.
Yeah, the Cypress deal is interesting to see who actually gets the claim on that. But one of the things the article does point out, and we heard a lot of talk about this maybe last year, 2 years ago, I can't remember now, time begins to run together. But a quote, this is from the piece talking about what Rystad said. It says, according to Rystad, the current resource replacement ratio for conventional resources is only 16%. In other words, only 1 barrel out of every 6 consumed is being replaced with new resources. So once you consume a barrel, 1 barrel once you consume 6 barrels, only 1 is being used to replace it. And so that was a fear that some folks were afraid of a few years ago when you saw the large super majors who have the ability to go and put money into discovering new oil fields. They were concerned that you might see a potential massive oil shortage in the future because they didn't invest the time and the energy and the resources to go find these new plays. My theory has been and still will be is that the longer this becomes an issue, eventually the market will correct and they will go and begin to deploy those resources. And here's kind of why I think that. So if you're, let's just say ExxonMobil, if you're ExxonMobil right now, I think it's safe to say that ExxonMobil has somebody or a team of some bodies in their office that goes, as of today, there is this many barrels of oil that could be drilled, and at the current projection, plus or minus 10%, this oil can be drilled for however many years, okay? So 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, whatever it is, right? Based upon that, they understand that when the crunch time, how long it takes to develop these resources, how long it takes to find them, historically speaking. So as we get closer to that threshold of when Exxon feels the pressure or Shell feels the pressure or whomever feels the pressure, that they feel like, okay, you know what, we're getting too close to this threshold here. The prices could get out of whack. I think you will see more resources deployed, and then you will begin to see more barrels come on the market or available to come on the market, if you will. So I don't necessarily worry about it like some people do. It is something to follow, but this is more spawned from the downturn, and companies pulled out the money to go do this research. And I think now as prices have kind of leveled off, and they should continue to be pretty decent for a while, it seems, I think you'll see that these stories will kind of start trickling back in, and then here you go, 3 years, 5 years from now, this will be a non-issue. Because again, I don't think Exxon is sitting around going, oh my gosh, we're going to run out of oil in 5 years. And they're not pouring in massive amounts of money without an acceptable alternative. The reason I say that is primarily this. I use this tool, Josh. Just imagine for a second, if you are the head of Exxon or the head of or Saudi Aramco or one of these big companies, your way of life is dependent on the earth having energy, right? So if the earth runs out of energy, your way of life basically ceases to exist. Now, you would have a better post-energy life than everyone else because you have more money, but at some point that goes away because if we actually run out of the ability to produce energy, people will riot and revolt, and you'll see all kinds of madness and chaos. If anyone understands that, those people understand it better than we do. And they make money by making sure that doesn't happen. So to me, it seems like it's more of a market calculation where we're at right now. The industry was down. They pulled the resources out of it. It's not a profitable venture today. They also understood that that they could come back and pick up these barrels through discovery in the next 3, 5, or 10 years. And so I don't think it's a big story. It is something to follow, though. It was surprising that it's only 1 out of every 6 are being replaced.
Yeah, that is. I didn't see that. There's another oil price that kind of speaks to the question we just answered from George, and just wanted to read this little quote here. True as this may be, there is no guarantee things will plateau at this level of problems and not deteriorate further. Reuters reports that banks have marked down the perceived value of U.S. oil and gas not just for next year, but for the next 5 years. This value makes the foundation of reserve-based loans, so the lower it is, the less money the banks will be willing to give businesses. This is just what I was talking about with, you got to live within cash flow. So however much money you're bringing in, that's what's going to be the determining factor for how much money the bank's going to loan you. It's based on how much money you're producing on a monthly or quarterly basis, not how much oil is there. And so that is keeping these producers on their toes, and it's also forcing them to live with much more modest budgets, which it makes things more difficult for these producers and for the service providers and vendors that are assisting them and working with them. But it also, I think, will bring some efficiencies. Things will stop being so sloppy. Waste will be cut down, and so I think. In the long run, it could end up bringing a little bit more efficiency to the industry.
Well, yeah, it's going to bring more efficiency. The other question is, if oil does go to $100 a barrel next year, what are the headlines? Are the headlines, are these still the same headlines, or the headlines change? Now, I'm not saying the oil's going to $100 a barrel, but I view these headlines as, they are a reality, but they're also a marketing ploy. You got to think like this. If you're a bank and you want to send a firm message to E&P companies, what do? You say, this is what we're doing moving forward. Yeah. The E&P companies read that and go, okay, we got to make sure we're capitulating, we're falling in line. If we're going to start a new E&P company, we're going to meet a tighter threshold, so we're not coming in just willy-nilly spending a bunch of money. So, again, they can change their opinion. So it's not like it's a government law that's locked in for 10 years. It's just something that is as the current state of things go.
So we had a story that came out. This was kind of a tragic story. There was a West Texas man killed by poisonous gas. So this was H2S. That's a 44-year-old out of Odessa. He's working for an oil company, and he went into a pump house, and H2S gas was there, so he died. And his wife was trying to get in touch with him along with some other folks, and so she got worried, drove out there with her 2 kids in the car, goes into this pump house, and then she actually dies as well. So this was a sad story. I put a post of it on LinkedIn. Hopefully the kids are all right. You hate to see stories like this, but unfortunately, this is some of the natural dangers that are just in the world.
It's children 6 and 9. If there's anyone who knows about this, and we can share a GoFundMe or something like that link, please send it into Nate. You got Nate's or my email, and we'll be happy to share that around. That stuff is, I was telling you, Josh, offline that there's people who do the H2S stuff a lot more than I have. But the one time I went out to get certified or trained for it or whatever, one thing they told me was if the H2S alarm goes off and your buddy falls down, to leave him. And so that's what our safety guy told us. I don't know if what every safety guy says or not, but that's what we were told. It is a very dangerous and deadly killer, and so tragic that the kids were 6 and 9. So if you can pass on any information, we'll be happy to pass it along and help raise some awareness or whatever. So Nate, what's
in the show notes?
Okay.
We'll be awesome. Well, good friend Sergio, he has a drilling down article.
In the show notes.
Callan Carrizo drill up to last minute of merger vote. So he has some good information here in this drilling down report. We need to get Sergio back on. It's been a little while since we had him on the show.
He's probably depressed right now because his Astros lost the World Series.
Yeah, this would be the perfect time to get him on. Man. Just wail on him for a little while. The spirits are down. He'll be defenseless.
That's monstrous, Josh.
Yeah, well, look at Josh. He is a monster this week. I found something interesting from the drill down report. First off,
that's monstrous.
Pioneer
Josh.
was number 1, EOG 2,
Nice
Marathon
Sergio.
3, Carrizo, and Exxon tied for the 4th spot. But he brings up the Barnett Shale again. And I can't tell if he's piling on at this point or is he giving us a shout out. And here's what I mean. No drilling permits were filed for horizontal wells in North Texas this past week. Okay, so thanks again, Sergio, for telling us what you've told us over and over and over and over again. However, but Granbury Oil Company, Caribou Operating, is drilling a vertical well. Now, the thing here is Josh, we're based out of where?
Granbury.
We're in Granbury.
Got an operating company.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is Sergio giving us a shout out or if Sergio is trying to tell Caribou they can thank us for their success. I'm not sure what the hidden message is here, but Sergio, if you want to call into the show, we'd be happy to take that. But yeah, we did have one finally drilled. It's good to see that Sergio does get. It feels like that should be the top line. That the Barnett should be the top of the line, not the bottom at this point. If we get one, like that's a huge increase from where we've been at.
Yeah, it is.
It's a 100%.
Yeah, if now 100% for this week and like the past 4 months, it feels like.
Yeah. So one thing to note here in the
It's a
article is
100%
that Marathon
increase.
is gearing to drill 15 horizontal wells in the Eagle Ford. So 15 horizontal and 1 vertical. So that's new information. A lot of their stuff has been going on in Midland and New Mexico. So interesting to see them moving out into the Eagle Ford. And then we got also an article came out about energy. So while I was in Midland, we were talking with some folks about some of the energy issues that they're facing out there. And they mentioned that there's a couple times this year where the city had these what they call brownouts, and so I had never heard of these until being there and hearing some of the locals actually talk about a lot of the energy was being used out in by these production companies, E&P companies, and the energy shortage that hits at certain times of the year is only going to get worse over the next year or two. So it's interesting to see the power grid out there and how the energy is going to respond to this, because it is going to put, I think, a certain amount of impetus for these companies to find different forms of electrical power so that they can not put the squeeze on the city itself in Midland.
So when you mentioned that was I guess I'd missed the news about the brownouts out there. I hadn't, just for whatever reason, I'd missed it, so I wasn't aware of that. It's interesting because over the past couple months, I've had a couple of offline conversations where there have been new solutions to help improve the grid. One is it's like micro modular, I think is the term, nuclear solution, and the other one has to deal with using basically using products on the that come from the well itself to power the rig. And so I'm curious, Josh, if we'll see maybe some kind of micro-modular nuclear technology that will come out there because they are pulling such a strain on the grid, be deployed in the city, and maybe the oil and gas companies could help finance that. I don't know how expensive it is compared to traditional power, but it's like a 20-year guarantee type power deal. And I don't know if it just takes 1 or 2 or whatever, but I wonder if you see solutions like that. So the oil and gas companies come in and go, you know what, we are sucking a lot of power, we're putting this around the people, here's a solution that you guys can run off that would be completely dependent on what we're doing. And then also some of these other solutions where the E&Ps can actually self-power themselves, especially when they're outside of the distribution network. So I wasn't aware of the brownouts. I did not know. I'd love for the listeners to email in and give us some insights on that. I don't know how I missed that story, but I guess I did.
Let's see, we have another article. Democrats just accidentally sparked a federal fracking boom. So this article came out, and I had some questions. And I was interested in it. Everybody's aware of what Warren tweeted out, that she was going to ban fracking if she wins presidency. So basically, assuming she won 2020, beginning of 2021, she's going to ban fracking. And so this article goes in and says that she is accidentally sparking a federal fracking boom. Now, from my perspective, the question was, the opposite seems to have been happening. Not a fracking boom, but actually a lot of companies are scaling back. Some of these companies are filing bankruptcy, so it doesn't seem like a boom is coming out of the tweet. So I just kind of was curious about what his perspective was. So he mentions Concho and how they're increasing their drilling on federal lands specifically, and sort of weaves that in with this tweet. Ryan, what did you think about the article?
You said you didn't want me to complain, right? That's the complaint counter has not started yet, correct?
It has not started yet.
Okay, we will.
I
No.
failed to pull up my dinger.
No. Okay, we're gonna work through this nice and slow.
It has not started yet. Hang on. I failed to pull up my dinger.
I was just pulling up the Baker Hughes rig count, and so you can go to Drilling Info, or you can go to Baker Hughes, or whomever, and they're gonna have slightly different numbers, but. According to Baker Hughes, the rig count this time, October 25th, is when it's last updated on here, was 1,068. That was last year. This year it's at 830. October 25th is when it's last updated on here. I don't know what the definition of boom is. That was last year. I'm not a wordsmith, as you know, if you listen to the show, but it doesn't seem to be that would be a boom. Now, you might think, well, you know what, Ryan? 830 is up from the previous week. Well, you'd be wrong, because the previous week it said 851. The week before that was 856. Now, we did have, oh, here it is, Josh. I'm sorry. You know what? I stand corrected. On 10-4, we had 855 rigs, and then in 10-11, we had 856. I'm sorry, I missed the boom. I missed that one rig improvement that week. I did miss the boom. It ended dramatically in terrible fashion when it went down 4 rigs the next week, or 5 rigs the next week. But you know what? We missed it, I guess. We just missed it in the headlines that the one rig boom that occurred in October. That's what we call it, the one rig boom of October 2019. And so I just missed that completely off my radar. And then, we're down 21 rigs this week. So the one rig boom has actually cost us like 30 rigs. So thanks, one rig boom. You have ruined it for the rest of us.
Yeah, my thoughts about this, Ryan, was if the statement comes out.
Hold on, because you left the center, you agree with Warren, just to be clear, right? I mean, I'm just making sure. Okay, so as someone who supports Warren, go ahead.
So this whole deal with this, with the socialists calling me a socialist, it's not a very appreciated.
It's close. It's close.
So I'm of the mindset where I think it would be an interesting experiment to see what it would be like if someone did ban fracking and then oil prices went up, and then maybe it would completely silence the lunacy for at least 10 years. So I'm one of those who would like to see more appreciation for the oil and gas industry, and instead of such nonsense like that. But looking at the article, one of the things I was concerned with, or at least the first thought I had was, why in the world would we want to respond to a tweet if the oil prices are down? Wouldn't that just further exacerbate the problem if we just kept drilling instead of responding with a brain and trying to have sense and strategy? That would be the worst thing for some of these companies to do.
If you actually read the quote, they are responding with strategy. That's the irony is. Concho is essentially saying that, we have 20%, like it is, of our land is federally held, so we might just go ahead and drill that earlier than we anticipated.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense.
It's not that despite the one rig boom we talked about, despite that, they're not going to be adding, 40 rigs in prevention here. So now listen, if 40 rigs come on a week from now, we'll come on and be like, well, in 2 weeks I'll be in China, so you have to eat the crow. Josh will come on and eat the crow, but it felt like this was a little bit of a premature headline.
So what do you think? And this was the first time that I had thought about the fracking boom. I mean, not the fracking.
The one rig boom?
The one rig boom.
Yeah, the one rig boom.
The ban on fracking that Warren mentioned, is that only with regards to federal land?
Well, that's kind of the question was, what presidential authority could she actually have? Now, they kind of get into some of this here, and I'm not, maybe you have some lawyers that want to weigh in on this. I'd love to hear it. But it seems to me that the powers of the presidency aren't exactly as clear as they were in maybe 1776. And so what Warren could do, what she can do, what she can't do, some of the questions that come to mind is, if she were to write an executive order, how long would it take for that to play out, even if it was one that she didn't have the authority to issue? Nate, you might know, this stuff a little better than we do, but if she were to, make up some kind of crazy executive order that she actually constitutionally doesn't have the power over, you're talking a long time. The best case would be for the oil and gas companies to get some kind of stay so they can keep working, but it'd still take a while to resolve that. It's not like you can't look at the executive order and go, oh no, because she could deploy actually other assets, so you had to go to the courts to work it out, correct?
educate me on a point that I'm not entirely sure of. The Bureau of Land Management is in charge of permits, correct?
Educate me on a point that I'm not entirely sure of. The Bureau of Land Management is in charge of fracking permits, correct? Okay. The Bureau of Land Management, if I recall correctly, is also an agency of the executive branch. And if Senator Warren were to be elected president, she would be the head of the executive branch, as our constitutional friends know. So it seems to me that an executive order of that nature would pretty much cut off the issuing of fracking permits. However, I'm not sure how long that would take to propagate into the field onto federal lands where people are actually drilling stuff, because
so yes, it would have immediate effects.
We're dealing with the U.S. government here, and it's Byzantine in its ability to enact change.
But the thing would be to get a stay first.
So yes, it would have immediate effects.
That would be the first challenge. Just to say, hey, Judge, we actually got a rig on the federal land right now. She signed this thing. We got to finish this rig. We can't actually get off today. That's they would contest that first. Say, hey, you can't actually. We can't leave. Like we're drilling. So they would ask for some kind of stay of the order for a while. So that'd be the first step, and then beyond that, it would be
unless our dear president decided to exercise his or her power as the commander-in-chief of the military to stop them.
Unless
that's what I said a minute ago. So no government official is going to do that, but that would actually be the thing. Is that so you couldn't just so even if you ultimately the presidential even if the executive order was unconstitutional because the president has other authorities that it can use at its disposal, you have to follow it, but you have to challenge it to the courts. So you challenge it with some kind of stay, postponement, whatever. If you got that, depending on how the ruling was written, it could be a permanent stay where you can continue to operate until it's resolved, or it could be a 30-day get your stuff out of there type deal. Absolutely. There's a lot of ways that could check out. The reality is that it would end her presidency quite quickly, and I'm thankful for that. So I'm not mad at all. That's not complaining. I'm thankful for that. I'm also thankful for the one rig boom I did not know about. So. That was impressive, guys. Keep that up. One rig boom. See, if the banks knew about the one rig boom, they'd be lending money left and right.
Well, keep in mind, Brian, that if that ended her presidency, it would probably. Let's say that ends in impeachment, and you get somebody else.
Well, keep in mind, Ryan, that if that ended her presidency, it would probably. Well, let's say that ends in impeachment. And you get somebody else in and say that she selects Julian Castro as her vice president.
I believe you've called Castro a moron repeatedly on this show. Right?
See, y'all are provoking me at this point. Y'all are just provoking me. I am trying to be upbeat. I am positive that she will not do this. She might revoke the federal lands.
Show, Ryan.
But, God, even that, it would seem to be... that she will not do this. I don't know if it's a stretch, but it would be interesting because you'd have governors like the governor of New Mexico who's seemingly kind of shifted her tone on policy there, saying, hey, we like oil and gas now, and oil and gas is our friend, and all this stuff. So New Mexico would take a huge hit because I don't know what percentage of the drilling in New Mexico is BLM land. It's substantial, maybe all. It's a substantial portion. And so you that would go away. So all those tax dollars would begin to go away. Then you have other questions about, what does it actually mean for the wells that are drilled, or if you have a duct, it's there but it's not finished. So there's a lot of litigation that would happen. If we have a lawyer that wants to come on one episode and just kind of walk us through that, we'd reach out to Nate, and we'd love to hear some insight because it's a interesting discussion on. Because the non-federal lands is really get sticky, right? That's where it would really get, that's unconstitutional. So it'd almost be two separate executive orders she'd have to write if she was smart, one for federal lands and then one for private citizens. And then you get into all kinds of stuff. So don't think either's going to happen. But anyways, we have a lawyer reach out to TexasOilAndGasPodcast.com, to Nate, myself, whomever, get you on, break down for us how it could happen, what the states could respond. It'd be a great episode just to talk about because it is a good thought exercise because they haven't always been as open as they are now. So,
well, a couple things. First, I'm going to be back in Midland for a conference.
You gonna clean up before you go?
I don't know. I'm thinking about there's no shave November, so we just need to start it off. It's 31st today.
Okay.
Shave November, not Yeti November.
Hold on, bro. If your truck breaks down the side of the road and someone sees you, they're gonna think like you've been walking
no
like Forrest
shave
Gump,
November,
walking
not Yeti
across.
November.
Ryan, I can't wait for you to be going to China. I can't wait for you to be going to China.
I'm just saying.
You gonna get it, bro. I'm telling you. Keep on. Get it in right now while you can.
I'm just saying, I'll trim it up a little bit. Your truck breaks down, you gotta walk get gas or something. Ain't no one picking you up like you look.
We also just called him Forrest Gump.
You Forrest Gump, yeah.
Well, at least they won't mistake me for a woman. So.
Whoa. What's that supposed to mean?
You also just called him Forrest Gump.
What's that supposed to mean? This might be the last episode. This might be it. Nate won't have to go to the lake because the show will be canceled.
So I'll be in Midland the week of the 13th. There's going to be a Pipeline Association luncheon that day as well. And so if anybody wants to meet up, let me know. You can get a coffee. I'll get you a lunch. I'll be there pretty much the whole week. So let me know if you got any openings, and we can meet up.
Yep, and I'm supposed to be, as I mentioned, out of the country next week. But if not, I will be around, might be in Houston. So you can follow on LinkedIn for that. Be sure to rate and review the show. We're not to 200 yet. We're getting there, so we need your help to get Nate in the lake. We will.
225.
Well, we gotta get to 200 for get to 225. It's kind of like that one rig boom, you know. You just gotta have some more substantial numbers here. We are trotting that way, but as the year winds down, you're gonna have Thanksgiving, you're gonna have Christmas, and you're gonna be full of turkey and eggnog and all that stuff, and you're not gonna want to take the 3 seconds it does to rate and review the show. So go ahead and do it now. We got to go ahead and order Nate a Speedo, and so we want to get him sized up for that.
I don't know where this Speedo angle is coming from, Ryan. I never agreed to that.
They may mistake him for a woman.
Again, I don't know where the Speedo angle is coming from, Ryan. I never agreed to that.
So we got to do that. Rate and review the
Choose
show.
your pronouns, Nate. Choose your pronouns.
5 star.
That'd be a terrible.
Until next time, keep loving.